Live from Naples, this is the Morning Break with Jane Ritter.
Morning, everyone. Lovely to be back at Teachers Talk Radio. Today is International Women's Day. How are you celebrating, or are you not celebrating? Please feel free to join and let us know in the comments.
Live from Naples, this is the Morning Break with Jane Ritter on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Okay, so good morning. This morning, as I said, is International Women's Day, and I've just been on LinkedIn and seen some really unusual comments. So I assume the trolls are out. As a woman, a woman who works, I really don't think that nasty comments on social media are going to help our cause in any way. Let's just try and stay positive and stick together. Obviously, my guest this morning isn't a woman, it's a man, a colleague from Italy. It's always nice to have, hopefully, help you learn a bit more about what happens here. I'll be talking to Richard Twigg, and Richard has been a teacher, director of studies. He's a teacher trainer. He also managed an IELTS test centre. He has a wealth of experience. He's mainly taught in the UK, Malta, and Italy, but obviously started his career in South Africa. I won't say any more because he's going to tell you all about it. Let's welcome Richard. And good morning, Richard. How are you today? Lovely to have you.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm doing well, thanks. And yourself?
Well, tell me, where are you based exactly?
I'm based in Collegno, which is a suburb just outside of Turin in the north of Italy.
And what's the weather like at the moment?
Quite sunny, actually. It's been a little bit hit and miss, but computer's telling me it's 12 degrees, so it feels quite comfortable.
It's pretty cold down here in Naples, but then winter's always shorter here, I think, for us.
Okay, yeah, no, it tends to fluctuate quite a bit up here. So
now, Richard, you've had quite an interesting teaching journey, or teaching and training journey. Could you just tell our listeners a little bit about you and where you've been, what you've done?
Okay, well, yeah, some people call it a bit of a checkered history. You can probably tell from my accent that I was not born in the UK. So I actually started my teaching career in South Africa as part of my military service. I was an officer instructor, and we had to prepare lessons sitting on our beds. And I trained other recruits to become officers after myself. So that was my first dabble in teaching. And then I went to the University of Huddersfield, where I did my certificate in further education, which is equivalent of a PGCE, but because I don't have a degree, I did the Cert Ed. And then I went to York College, was teaching post-compulsory education, post-16 education. Then in 2005, my wife and I decided we were tired of the cold weather in the north of England, and we moved to Malta. And having a look around, I said, okay, well, I need to train as an English language teacher because Malta, that's one of the big things in Malta. So I did my CELTA. And then basically from then, I haven't really looked back. I did my FTBE business English course when I arrived in Malta. Exactly 2 years after doing the CELTA, a very foolish decision, but I did it. I did my Delta. I managed to pass. I wouldn't recommend that to anybody, not even to my worst enemy. Exactly 2 years.
That's quite, I mean, they kind of recommend 3 or...
Yeah, I would recommend people to have 5 years because you need the experience. I was struggling for experience. I did manage to get a distinction in my extended assignment,
Wow.
but I passed the other 2. But it was hard work. But my goal was to become a director of studies, and in Malta, that was a requirement to have the Delta. And then I carried on teaching. I was director of studies, moved to Italy, and then I started to get into language coaching. So I've kind of still teaching, but trying to do a bit of language coaching as well. So that's my kind of checkered teaching history.
You worked in Milan for quite a long time, but you're based in Turin. Did you commute or?
I commuted every day,
Wow.
2 hours each way, Monday to Friday for 6 years.
Oh my goodness. And what do you do on a train for 4 hours a day?
Well, the whole journey was 2 hours from door to door. So luckily there was a high-speed train. We had a group of about 6 or 7 of us who all met up on the platform in Turin.
I can see
we had a good we had a good chat. I managed to use my broken Italian. Or from all different sectors, these people were. And then we'd meet up in the evening. And because we were regular travelers, we got the Frecciarossa card. And in Milan, they offered a free aperitivo. So we used to pop into the Freccia lounge and have our aperitivo before we jumped on the train, said goodbye at 8 o'clock or whatever it was, went home. And it made the journey a little bit more enjoyable. A lot of the time in the morning, I used to nod off. In the evening, sometimes I would catch up with emails and do a bit of work. But it's only afterwards that you realize just how tiring it was when you've done it for 6 years. It's quite a...
Yeah. I think, commuting is something that I haven't had the fortune of doing. I'm kind of lucky living in it's a very compact city.
Okay.
So, I can get up and down on a funicular quite quickly.
Fantastic. Yeah, it was a baptism of fire because I'd lived in Malta before, and my morning commute was 7 minutes. So from 7 minutes to 2 hours, it was a bit of, in the beginning, it did take me a bit of time to adjust.
That could be a new radio program. To commute or not to commute?
Commute. Exactly. Yeah. And what is a reasonable commute and what is seen as being ridiculous?
Getting back to teaching. Richard, what are your top 5 teaching tools?
Quite difficult, really, if I have to think of my main teaching tools. I would say probably now, as a result of COVID and the situation, I'd have to say probably Zoom, because I do so many lessons online. Secondly, I'd probably say my students. I like to see my students as a resource and to get information and get stuff from them. I probably then tap into my experience, my empathy with my students, and to a certain extent, it might sound a bit cheesy, but my humor. I like to sort of play around with humor a little bit. I would say those are my my tool bag.
That's your tool bag. That's your top 5. That's quite cool. It's an interest when you ask people this question. Some of it can be very, very structured, but yours is very human. I like it very much. So VR. Our listeners who are not sure what it is, what is VR?
Okay, so probably in a nutshell, VR stands for virtual reality. And it's probably best known or came to light as a result of Mark Zuckerberg renaming Facebook, or the holding company of Facebook, to Meta, to envisage this idea of the metaverse, which he was hoping was going to be an alternative universe that people are going to live in. But for me, I see VR, for those people that possibly saw them, didn't see them, if you can remember the Google Cardboard, where you had these little foldable things and you could slide your mobile phone in. Possibly even going further back to the old kaleidoscope where you used to look in as a child and used to see these pictures. The key thing is it's that, not necessarily on steroids, but it's an extension of that, where you put on the goggles and you can be completely immersed in a different world. So you are literally in another reality, and the reality is obviously not real, so hence virtual reality. And you basically interact with avatars. So you are not obviously a real person. You don't appear as yourself. You appear as an avatar, is what they call it, the characters or the people.
So we're going to get onto how you use it in the classroom, but what prompted your interest in VR in the classroom? How did you begin? I kind of stumbled across it. I've always been interested in technology in different forms. Probably from as a child. I'm not a computer gamer. I don't own a computer console. I never have. I was terrible. I couldn't even play Pac-Man. That's how bad I was at computer games. Oh, come on, play Pac-Man.
No, I failed at Pac-Man. That was my kind of. My brother made me wear that badge with pride. And so from that point of view, I was always interested in dabbling with technology, and I'd done a couple of presentations or looked into using technology in the classroom. And then I stumbled across it through a gentleman who might be well known to people, Jonathan Dykes, who was at that time part of International House. And he'd come over and he'd done the inspection in Milan, and he started talking about a project that he was working on called Virtual Reality for Language Learners. And when I heard about it, it just sparked an interest, and I looked into it and I said, hey, this is something that was quite cool. So it was just literally by chance that I stumbled across it. It was not something that I'd gone looking for.
But how can teachers integrate VR in the classroom?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that, like any technology, virtual reality is not there to replace. It's not there to be an alternative classroom. This is my opinion, obviously. It's there to enhance the teaching, just in the same way that we use a course book or we use a video on YouTube, or we get the students to use a mobile phone or a tablet. And one of the key things with VR that is different for me from using a computer, a tablet, or what have you, is that the students can actually be 100% immersed in that world or in that environment. So they could, for example, be studying something in geography or in their language book, and they're talking about countries, and maybe it's Sydney, and there's a Sydney Opera House. You can actually transport them, and they could be standing outside the Sydney Opera House and looking up at it. And the key thing is to actually feel as if they're there, but they haven't left the classroom. But they're not looking at it from a computer screen and seeing all their friends and having the distractions. They physically, wherever they look, up, down, left, right, they are in front of the Sydney Opera House. And that, for me, is what makes it so exciting.
You must need a lot of technology to get that. I mean, what kind of things do you need for the classroom?
No, fortunately, it's actually relatively simple, considering what you can do with it. The main piece of technology is what they call the VR headset, the goggles. And obviously, as Mark Zuckerberg spent, I won't go into the numbers, but he spent a lot of money some years ago buying the company that made the VR technology called Oculus. And he bought that well before he renamed the company.
Right.
And in the beginning, they were sold as an Oculus Quest. There was an Oculus Rift, and they had the Oculus Quest, and now they have the Quest 2. But since I think last year, he renamed all of the equipment and it's now called MetaQuest. But the standard headset costs, I think it now retails for 499 euros, but I heard recently that the price is due to come down again. They've just put it up by 100 euros, but I think Facebook has realized, or Meta's realized, that sales, I mean, there are 20 million, they've sold 20 million headsets. So there's a fair few people out there. People probably have heard about the MetaQuest Pro, but that retails for 1,600 euros, and that's for serious gamers. That's mixed reality. So the classroom one is literally a headset. Let's call it 500 euros for argument's sake. And with that, you get your hand controllers, and after that, you don't need anything. You have your one headset for the classroom. You need a whiteboard, interactive whiteboard, data projector screen so that the students can see and share the experience. You don't need cables. You just need a Wi-Fi connection. And the way that I see VR is that you should just have one, possibly two students wearing the headset. So you're not trying to put the whole class in and then losing classroom management and who's going where and doing what, and having great communication. So, one headset, 500 euros, and most of the apps you can get for free. Obviously, the games cost a lot of money, but for education, we're only interested in the apps, and most of those apps you can get for free.
What do you see as the benefits or the pitfalls? I mean, obviously, in terms of being able to be somewhere, that's definitely a benefit. Are there other benefits?
Yeah, I would say the major benefit is the immersion. The opportunity that the students can interact with the world, so they can pick things up, they can move around. At the moment, it's still, I would say, a little bit in its infancy, but with virtual reality in general, they do have the feeling of touch, so you can put what they call haptic gloves on. You can put a haptic vest on, so you can actually feel, if you're doing paintballing, you can feel as if you've been shot. They have haptic shoes, but those are kind of for gamers, education. But I think later on that will start to come. And it's the fact that you do really feel, I've had the experience with teachers that I've trained who sort of said, wow, I felt like I was there. And that for me sums it up. It's that kind of, it's feeling completely immersed and having that sense that you are in another place, and brings things to life.
Incredible.
Pitfalls, I suppose, like anything, it could be seen as another mod con for some people, another piece of technology. It could also, some people are a little bit worried about motion sickness.
Oh, I never thought of that.
But the key thing there is, there's two different things. There's 3 degrees of freedom and 6 degrees of freedom. And in a nutshell, if you've got 3 degrees, if I walk towards my computer screen moves away from me. And that confuses the brain, because you say, hold on, but I should be getting closer, not maintaining the distance. So if I'm walking and things are moving away, that sometimes starts to confuse the brain. Right. And that's when you start to get motion sickness. But if you have 6 degrees of freedom where you can look up, look down, look left, look right, move closer to things and literally bump into, but you can't bump into them, you just walk through them, then you avoid the motion sickness. But it's also possible to do it seated. So if people prefer sitting, it is possible to still have, but it's not quite the same experience.
Incredible. I mean, would this, sorry, I'm focusing on the motion sickness now, but would that happen to people who would normally suffer from that, or is it just a feeling of...
No, I would say it's only those people that I've asked if they are kind of susceptible to motion sickness. I normally say to them just to be aware. So I ask them as a precaution. But I haven't actually had anybody, even people that suffer from motion sickness, so far nobody's told me that they felt sick. What I do try to do is I do try to limit the amount of time. So I normally say, I've never gone that far, but 20 minutes would be the maximum at any one time that I would encourage someone to be exposed wearing a headset.
Is it easy to set up a VR classroom?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I would say once the headset is set up, like setting up your mobile phone, you've got your apps and you've got everything you need. Once you have the Wi-Fi link, there's a simple action where they call it casting, and you are displaying to the classroom what you can see in the headset. So obviously they can only see it in 2D, but at least they get to see what you're doing, where you're going, and they can kind of be part of the experience, and you could describe things to them, or they could ask you to look left, look right, or what's that on the floor, or turn around so we can all see what you're looking at. So it's quite fun from that point of view.
You've given us a couple of suggestions how to use it in the classroom. It's also, I can see quite a lot of emerging language seems to come from it. I mean, when you plan your lessons, could you just, I know you talked visiting the Sydney Opera House, and could you just talk us through like a simple VR lesson plan?
Yeah, I mean, I've done, one was I used it with a group of 10-year-olds, so in in elementary school. And I asked them either where they came from, where they would like to go to, and I got them to put the goggles on and then to describe what they saw: a tree, a traffic light, a car, a building. And then the other people in the class had to sort of try and identify. So at a very low level, it was just literally using those kind of things. The more structured lesson would be the ones from VR for language learners, or VR number 4LL. And there you have 4 worlds, and each world has 2 activities. And the activities are planned out as a complete lesson. So if we take one, for example, the students are told that there's a problem with the transmission equipment on the space station, and you need to go to the space station and carry out the repair. But there's a caveat. The problem is that it involves a spacewalk. You need to go outside the spacecraft and carry out the repair outside. So it comes complete with lesson plans, but basically in a nutshell, what you do is student would get into an aircraft, press a button to choose the world that they want to go to, and they'd end up in the space station. They've got a number of doors. They could either be assisted by the class, because the class could have notes telling them what to do, or they could be left, if they're a higher level, basically figure it out and work out what you need to do and what you need to gather and talk to each other and problem solve. But basically, they need to find a backpack. They put on the backpack, because obviously they need their hands free. Then they're going to find 3 tools: pliers, screwdriver, and a spanner. Obviously, you're probably never going to use a spanner in space, but general sort of tools that they could use. And 3 different colored circuit boards. Then they find a code, a 6-digit code. Once they've got their backpack and they've memorized the code, or they've got the class to memorize the code, they can put on their helmet, which means that they now don their space suit.
Right.
And when they breathe, it sounds like they're breathing like Darth Vader. And they can open the door. They can leave the spacecraft, so they can now actually see space and walk on this glass walkway. And they go to this, they can see the Earth down below. And there's this communications antenna. They put in the number. They remove the screws, take off the plate, take out the circuit board, put in the new one, close it up, and then go back inside, and they press a button and it tells them they've been successful. And obviously that's very, in a nutshell, there's all sorts of options and ways that you could make it more difficult, enhance communication. And there, when I've done it, you've got at least 20, 30 minutes of activity. And then the key thing is what you do after that.
Yeah.
Because now the kids have sort of been to space, and you could ask them to talk about space travel, astronauts, daily life of an astronaut. You can have a discussion on with higher level classes using it. But at least now they've felt a little bit of space, and they feel that they've got something to talk about. They've kind of experienced it in a different way than just watching a video or And things they could have somebody doing a radio interview whilst they're doing the actions. They could have somebody writing a blog. They could write up
you
a
didn't
summary.
suggest we did that for the radio show. Wow.
Wow, that could be the next one. So I could be exploring and you could be describing what's happening.
This sounds incredible. I mean, obviously for learners, it must be really motivating.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that from all the learners that I've done it with, the feedback has been pretty amazing. I mean, I'll be honest, I tried it with one group and we spent an hour and a half, which was obviously far too long. And I used different activities and a couple of people said it got boring. But that was because of a limited time period. But generally speaking, 99% was amazing, incredible, fantastic, so real life, different. And for me, that was just that just gets the motivation of the students. And if you're getting that kind of feedback, how memorable the words, the vocabulary, the language, and you could put in so much stuff will get the students to out in that environment. They're kind of like sponges then.
Yes. In terms of support, do you find that you need to give them more or less support?
I would say most of the time with the kids, because they are quite adept at using, I think the basic thing is just to explain to them, if they haven't used them before, the basic functions, how you move, how you pick things up, but they pick up those kind of things quite quickly. I would dare to say it's normally the teachers that need the most support, because for some teachers, it is a leap into the unknown. It's technology that maybe they haven't experienced. But I take myself as an example. I'm not a computer gamer, as I said. I've never played computer games, and I picked it up really easily. So I normally sort of say, if I can do it, there's teachers out there that have gamed and maybe not big gamers, but they've played computer games. So they are a step ahead, and it's not that different.
I'm going to pause you there because I do want to come back to the idea of teacher support and how we can help them. But we have just a brief news break.
Okay.
And we'll be right back after that.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC has relaunched the 500 Words Writing Competition. The competition was first launched on Radio 2 in 2011 by its then breakfast show presenter Chris Evans. The UK-wide contest continued until 2020 with Evans' successor Zoe Ball. It will return in September and will again be backed by Queen Consort Camilla. It'll also be supported by Sir Lenny Henry. The announcement was made on Thursday the 1st of March, World Book Day, on BBC One's Breakfast News programme. BBC Breakfast presenter John Kay said, "We are delighted to be championing 500 words and look forward to stellar entries from talented, aspiring young writers." Up until 2020, the competition had received more than 1 million stories, all written by children and adding up to more than 440 million words. Judges on this year's panel will include teachers and librarians, as well as best-selling authors, which will include former Children's Laureate Mallory Blackman and Charlie Higson, author of 5 of the Young Bond novels. The grand final will feature 50 of the best entries from 2 different age categories, and it will take place on World Book Day 2024. WhatsApp messages by government ministers and civil servants during the height of the pandemic have been causing a stir in many circles since The Telegraph published its series of stories giving insight into a usually private world. Several teaching unions hit out at what was described as contemptible comments made in the WhatsApps by former Education Secretary Sir Gavin Williamson. In the messages, Williamson appeared to suggest that staff were looking for an excuse not to work during the pandemic. There were also comments made by former Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who referred to teaching unions as a bunch of absolute arses. Sir Gavin was seen to reply, "They really, really do just hate work." In a perhaps ill-advised series of tweets this week, Sir Gavin Williamson attempted first an apology, saying the comments were aimed at some unions and that he had the utmost respect for teachers. But many of those replying pointed out that unions are made up of teachers and that cannot be separated. They and union leaders went on to point out that teachers worked throughout the pandemic. National Education Union Joint General Secretary Mary Bousted went on to say that she hoped that the present Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, did not share the contemptuous attitude whilst the current pay dispute continues. Whilst the pay disputes continue in England, they are possibly just getting started in the Channel Island of Guernsey. NASUWT leaders on the island say that local members have voted overwhelmingly in favour of industrial action over pay and workload. According to a report in Guernsey Press, strike action was backed by 9 out of 10 voters who took part in the ballot. 57% of members voted. Teachers in Guernsey have been offered a 3-year deal with a 5% increase in 2022, a 7% increase in 2023, and an increase of 1% below inflation in 2024. Meanwhile, in Scotland, the EIS union has suspended all planned strike action after a new pay deal was offered. The 12.3% increase on the current pay rate has been welcomed by EIS leaders, who are said to be recommending its members accept the offer. The union will ballot its members on the deal, which would see teacher pay rise by £5,200 in April. Scotland's Education Secretary has welcomed the suspensions of strike action, but the NASUWT's General Secretary, Dr Patrick Roach, said the offer was paltry, and whilst it would ballot members, its campaign of strike action and action short of strikes would continue. Finally, while strike action causes disruption in schools, the Eastern Daily Press reports that some families have opted for family days out to local tourist attractions. Many of the attractions have created special offers and promotions to make the most of possible extra visitors on planned strike days. Banham Zoo and Africa Alive offered free entry for up to 3 children per paying adult. A spokesperson for the attraction said they hope to provide an educational experience for children to learn about the planet and the environment. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week we're going to talk about tech for well-being. We all have tech all around us, but what do you do to strike a work-life balance when technology makes you available 24/7? During the pandemic, parents having the ability to directly message or email teachers increased, and for good reason. The issue now is some schools have continued to maintain this communication. Here are a couple of ideas to let tech make your communication a little easier. First, you need to read your school's policy on replying to messages. This will outline what you're expected to do. A lot of systems have an auto response or an out-of-office reply. When you're taking a break, switching this on can send an automated message to let people know you will respond in a timely manner. Here is where you could quote the school's policy. Do not disturb is another setting you could use to stop devices notifying you between set times that you decide. You can also set this so certain people, like family and friends, can still alert you. Delayed response is a setting in a lot of email applications. To create emails at unsociable times, you can set them to send at specific times, allowing you to work when you like, but not go against any timing set out in school policy. Why not tell us what you do with tech for your well-being at TT Radio Official? I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
And welcome back. Lovely to have you back with me. As we were just talking about teacher support, the students seem to, obviously navigate often better than us. What kind? I know you do a lot of teacher training, and you've actually trained teachers to use VR.
I have, yeah.
What kind of support do they need?
I would say depending on the teachers and their own kind of previous knowledge, I normally, the training that I've done has been anything in the region of 3 to 4 hours. One of the advantages is with technology, that training can also be done remotely. It's not something that has to be done face to face.
Would add an extra complication for you, I assume.
It is a little bit, but I kind of, I've done it both ways. Obviously, face to face is easier for me. It's more comfortable. I'm in control. Doing it online, there are basically two options. If people want to discover and find out how things work and to watch rather than be doing, then that's certainly doable because I have the headset and I could demonstrate and they could sort of see as I'm talking through. But in an ideal world, the teachers would have a headset and I could talk them through using it so they get firsthand knowledge and experience. We know that's better. But sometimes people might sort of say, hey, I don't know that my school doesn't know that they want to invest 500 euros until we've had a little bit of a feel or an idea what it's like. So let me be a student first. You can kind of tell me what to do. And then maybe from there, again, depending on their own experience, I might say, okay, I've got enough. I can go away and buy the stuff and then replicate what you've done. Or maybe we need to come back to you for an hour or 2 hours just to kind of practice it with some support or guidance.
Wow. I mean, if a teacher was starting out and was thinking about introducing VR to their classroom with their students, what advice would you give them?
I would say, there's two options. Either go knocking on the director or the director of studies' door and saying, this is a great piece of technology. Is the school ready, willing to invest in getting, because you could have one headset for 5 or 6 classrooms because they're not all going to be using it at the same time. So it's not a case of having to fork out a lot of money in the beginning. So I think because if you can get the school on board, even better. But
what is the take up of VR in the classroom?
It depends. It tends to be, I've been a little bit disappointed with some schools that have gone and bought the headsets. They're not schools that I've done training with. And some of them have then sort of said that the headset sits in the cupboard. Now, I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet, but the schools that I've trained, and there's one particular school I did the training online in Poland, and they're constantly posting lessons that they've done using VR with their students. And so clearly, and there the owner was the one that approached me and said, I'm interested. I'm going to buy 2 headsets. Can you train up my teachers? And so I think that's important to have the buy-in from the top. But if there is a teacher out there that says, hey, I really like this, and you feel that it would be a good investment for your students, for yourself, 500 euros, yes, is a lot of money, but it's not an insurmountable amount. You could buy it yourself and you could give amazing lessons to your class. And then maybe the school might come around and say, hey, you're doing so well, let me buy that headset off you, or let's buy a second headset. But don't be put off by sort of saying, I have to do it through the school. Maybe, people have tablets and computers that they use with their students, a similar kind of idea.
Yeah.
But obviously, if the school invests, then it's obviously, they would hopefully invest in some training as well, because that for me is important.
You do a lot of international teacher training, don't you?
I do, yeah.
Tell me a bit, tell our listeners a bit about that.
Well, because I started out when I was based in Malta. I was just a director of studies at a school in Malta. And then when I left and came to Milan, I was director of studies of International House in Milan. And then the person that owned the school in Malta. Whether he sold it because I left, I'm still not too sure, but he's a very good friend of mine.
Okay.
And we built up the school together. And then unfortunately, for reasons of love and personal reasons, I left the school, and he was kind of a little bit upset and sold the school quite soon afterwards. But we are still good friends, and we've set up this teacher training company together, Mediterranean training. And as a result, we've been very fortunate to be recognized by the ELT Council in Malta, government organization. And so they ask us to do teacher training. We also offer teacher training with funding from the European Union in Malta, and also to teachers who are willing to pay.
Yeah.
And then also I've done that sort of similar training in Italy. So we have a strong base in Malta because of the fact that I was there, and I'm kind of quite well known in Malta, and also Costantino is still there. So that's been quite useful from that point of view too.
I mean, if you had to choose, would you move back to Malta or would you stay in Italy?
I've given it some serious thought, I must be honest, because life is very different. I had a very good life in Malta. I was a rugby coach, but I've managed to find rugby coaching again in Italy. So I've kind of started to balance things out. And on balance, I think that I would have to be a no. I think possibly if I had to move, it would be another country for a new experience rather than rather go forward and go backwards.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I just thought maybe it would be a climate.
Yep. Yeah. From a climate point of view, would be a no-brainer. But I have convinced 5 friends to join me for 10 days in Malta to go cycling. So we're going back in May.
You do visit it regularly.
Yeah. I still have a daughter there, so I have a reason to go back.
Wonderful. You've also just trained as a coach.
Yeah.
Tell our listeners a bit about that.
Okay, so again, it's one of those things that's always been in the back of my mind. I'd always had this inkling or a desire possibly to be a life coach. And I thought of going into life coaching at one point when I was in Malta, and then nothing came of it, and I continued in teaching. And then I, again, just by chance, stumbled across the neuro-language coaching, which was set up by Rachel Maria Paling. And I did the first course, and then you kind of like, right, okay, I'll scrape the money together. I'll do the second course. And I did all 3 courses. And then I did the teacher training course, so I can now deliver those neuro-language coaching courses. And I also registered as a coach with the International Coaching Federation in America. And what appealed to me was, I think it was the fact that I saw myself more as a coach than a teacher, in the sense that...
Given your background, yes.
Really. Yeah, a bit like I was sort of saying before, that my students are also a resource. So I don't like to kind of direct and be a traditional teacher style. I like to kind of involve. And the neuro-linguistic side was something that I hadn't really looked into, but it's using the brain and making things brain friendly, and helping students to learn using the neurological side of things. So from that point of view, it's very, very interesting.
Wow. Who are the people that inspire and influence you, Richard?
I suppose that in EFL, the first person that, and I hate name dropping, but I'm quite honored to be able to call him a friend, is John Hughes. I mean, he was my teacher trainer when I did the FTBE, which doesn't exist anymore, but the first certificate in teaching business English when I was in Malta. And then we stayed in touch, and then I asked him for advice about doing the Delta, and he encouraged me to go ahead and do the Delta. then I had the opportunity.
It's his fault, is it?
Yeah, it's his fault. It's all John's fault. He was the one that told me, go for it, you should do it. And then I co-taught a FTBE course with him, which was a great honor. But I think that there's a lot of people in EFL and a lot of students that I've kind of helped and taught, and just seeing them achieving their goals and reaching their goals for me is probably as inspirational as some of the big names. I mean, I sort of
lovely response. Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with you. John Hughes is fantastic. He's doing amazing stuff. He's just sort of launched a course on materials writing.
Materials writing, yeah.
And that is, that's a really great thing.
Yeah, my only bugbear with John is, and if he's listening, he was writing a book for the American market whilst we were doing the FTBE. And he used to sit on my balcony and he was writing, and I was hoping at least he would have put a mention that, thanks to the beautiful views sitting on my balcony, but obviously that never came up. But I know that he was there writing that book in my balcony in Malta when he was.
I think it's there. You just haven't read it.
I just haven't seen it. It's hidden in the book somewhere. But so it's.
And so you've done a lot. What does the future hold? What would be your sort of personal life goal, or what's the future going to be?
Yeah, that's if I had a crystal ball, I'm not sure. I was possibly unfortunate to have to make a change just before COVID came. So I've spent the last 3 years trying to set myself up as a freelancer, and I'm still making inroads in that. So I'm hoping that will solidify. I sincerely hope to continue helping students, helping teachers, and building with that. And long may that continue. I mean, I'm 56, but I've not got retirement thoughts, ideas. Some people are talking, I've got friends that are starting to retire, and people are asking, and people are talking about retiring. I'm thinking, well, that for me is, I don't know if it will ever happen.
My dad's only just retired. He's 70. I'm trying to think, how old am I? No, he's about 78. My dad.
And that for me, that's my goal. I don't want to put my feet up and get into gardening and do whatever. I just like to continue as long as I can, as long as I'm appreciated, or as long as I feel that I can have something to offer. I would like to continue coaching, teaching, training.
Tell our listeners a fun fact about you, something that they couldn't possibly know.
A fun fact, an unusual fact that probably people that know me might be quite surprised, but I was the assistant coach and the team manager for the Maltese women's sevens rugby team.
Brilliant.
And
brilliant.
I took them to the European Championships in Ghent, where we had to play a big difference between Malta, where we struggled to get enough players together for sevens. We couldn't ever get a 15 together. Men was obviously easier, but the women was more difficult. And we came up against Scotland and Ireland, and they were in the competition because they'd been forced to qualify for it was a World Cup qualifying competition, and they needed to be there to qualify. So obviously it was like the big teams against the minnows, but we beat Israel, so we didn't come last.
Wonderful.
So that was my.
And now, if you were a virtual character, what would you be?
Virtual character. It's probably going to sound really, really cheesy, but it would probably have to be Superman. And there's a couple of reasons for that, because one of my teachers when I was in Malta was a budding artist, and she drew a pencil drawing of me as Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was at IH Milan, we did a poster campaign, and you luckily can't see my face, but they decided that I should be ripping my shirt open with the IH logo, pretending to be Superman, and that was on big billboards in Milan. So I suppose I'd have to go ahead and be Superman, even though I would look ridiculous with my underpants on the outside. But anyway. Definitely not a good thing to think about, but particularly if you guys are having lunch or whatever, I do apologize.
Yes, exactly. Oh, fantastic. Do you have a favorite quote?
Yeah, I think that I'd written one down, but I'm not too sure whether it's a slight swear word, so I thought I'd probably best avoid it. But I like the quote from Forrest Gump, that, life's like a box of chocolates. And you never know what you're going to get. And I think that's what my life has been like. And long may that continue. I've enjoyed that kind of assortment and variety.
Exactly. Yes, I think certainly living in Mediterranean Europe every day is a bit of an adventure, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes.
I mean,
And living in Italy adds to the mix as well. Mediterranean Europe is one thing. Italy is then another side to the whole experience.
I just kind of say every day is an adventure.
Exactly. Yes.
You just never know what is going to happen, really. Do you have a favorite film?
Yeah, strangely enough, and this might come as a bit of a shock. I've watched many films, but there's two that kind of struck a chord with me, and one was Searching for Sugar Man. And if anybody that has seen it will see the significance that was the time in which that I was growing up in South Africa. And until I saw that movie, I thought that Rodriguez was Bob Dylan. That's what a lot of people in South Africa thought until it came out. We realized he was actually a completely different character. So I used to listen to his songs, and it was sort of really brought things home to me. And then the other one was watching a film called Dog Man, which is an Italian, and I just was absolutely blown away by it. So emotional, and I managed to understand it in Italian, although my Italian is very bad, but I watched it twice, and that's quite unusual for that kind of film, but I really enjoyed that. Obviously there's other great films, but those were just two that left their mark on me, should I say.
Well, that will really help our listeners. Good. Thank you, Richard. It has been an absolute pleasure to chat to you and completely open my eyes up to VR and the possibilities. I'm sure that as we move forward, we will be incorporating more and more technology.
Hopefully, yeah.
In our classroom, obviously not replacing ourselves as teachers.
No.
But being able to guide, and it's thanks for coming on the show. It's really opened my eyes up also to the linguistic possibilities that can evolve from this that kind of situation. I just think it's incredible, and I do wish you luck, and I do hope there's more take up, and that teachers that are doing that actually get some decent training so that they can fully exploit it.
Thanks very much to you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure to spend some time and to chat to you. So
to you. Yeah, we don't do it enough. It's sort of I think now that we're going to start moving around Italy a bit more, you never know, our paths shall cross. I'm
fantastic.
Okay.
And I hope that it is interesting to those of you that are signed in to listen or going to listen later on. I hope that there's been, interesting or entertaining, at least, if not interesting.
Exactly. No, my kids have got a headset. I might just go and dig it
You
up.
might dig it out and have a look and try it out.
Maybe play around on it and
Yeah.
see what I can do. Thank you, Richard.
My
Very, very
pleasure.
inspiring and lovely to talk to you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Jane. Take care.
You too.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.